From the war zones of Iraq to the climate-threatened shores of the Pacific, Pushpi Weerakoon has been at the heart of some of the world's most urgent crises. A force in peace building, migration and gender justice, her work spans continents, conflicts and cultures. In this compelling Q&A on Kaleidoscope Let's Talk, she opens up about navigating fragile futures, building lasting peace and what it truly means to serve humanity at the front lines of global transformation. So you've worked on some of the world's most complex crises, from post-conflict Iraq to the Rohingya crisis in Bangladesh. Now, how do you navigate all these fragile and often politically charged environments?
When I'm told that we are going to be posted for a mission, what happens is you're briefed. And then the briefing could be very brief too, right? So what we do is we go and do our own, we educate ourselves. So it could be a report that's been written, or one thing that I do, I make sure, is I read about the history and the norms and the rituals of that particular country, because that helps you when you go to that country to understand the context. And then once you're there, what we do is we do need assessments, and we also do stakeholder mapping to understand the conflict at the ground level, which almost all the time becomes a total different story to what you hear when you're outside, right? So that's really important. So it's not like we just parachute in and provide solutions. We go and assess the situation, speak to the local context, which involves the leadership, the local leadership, and also the international leadership, and also the other international agencies like INGOs, NGOs, and the other UN agencies. And then we figure out what is the most conducive way of going about helping the people.
So you were instrumental in developing Sri Lanka's first office for reparation and also led key efforts in drafting legislation. What makes these efforts more meaningful when you have to especially work with survivors of conflict related in sexual abuse, for instance?
The most important thing in reparation is that we listen to the survivors, give them what they need. So in terms of the Sri Lankan reparation bill and the act to get that information, almost 1.5 years I traveled across Sri Lanka to all the districts and little pockets of Gram Sevaka Vasams to speak to these little pockets of survivors who have at that time migrated also much more deeper and more onto the southern sides to understand the current needs, because the needs change, right? So even if you are being given a certain amount maybe in the 80s and the 90s, given the current situation, that's not enough. So they would tell you that. So you need to listen to them. That's important. Listening to them and figuring out what it is that they need is the most important thing in providing reparation.
You were leading some projects in the Pacific at the forefront of climate-induced migration. How do you navigate the tension between, say, humanitarian response and long-term policy?
Our immediate action is life-saving. So we go in, we do whatever that it's needed to make sure that the people have the security. And then within conflicts, there's always other little conflicts that arises. So we go and do the mitigation activities. And then in the same process, in the same time that we do that, we also look into see how can we do it in a long-term way, a more sustainable manner. So that's where the early warning systems comes in. We collect data that helps us a lot to know what's going to happen in the future. So we put early warning systems in place, and then we go into long-term policies, which are like the sea level rising adaptation plans. And then we also build international cooperation. That is very important because these small islands, sometimes you have to evacuate and you need another space. So we build that relation.
So you lead a fair number, again, gender-focused projects. And also this is across diverse cultural contexts. How do you ensure that these strategies don't just become tokens only?
So gender mainstreaming is not only done in gender-specific projects. It's done in all the projects across the spectrum. So what we do is we have what is called the gender marker index, where it gives a percentage from the population and of course the issue at hand. It tells you whether you're giving the resources in an equal manner, in an equitable way. When you say gender, I know a lot of people think it's just a sexual orientation, which is not the case. It's also, we look into the age limits, youth, and also the disabilities. So every project, say for instances, we are building a housing scheme or a camp context. Are there toilets, separate toilets for everybody? Is it safe? Is the road lit up? Can children play? Is there a pathway for elephants to go in a natural sense? And are we blocking that? Because that will become a conflict later on. So all that is taken into account. So it's not just gender-focused projects.
You've contributed to transitional justice in Sri Lanka, in Iraq, and also various other places. How can countries reconcile their demand for justice with the political will for peace?
One thing you need to keep in mind is transition justice and say reconciliation should be done together. It's not like first try reconciliation or then transition justice. It should be done at the same moment so that you will understand the issues that are popping up based on the survivor's need. So like I said, it takes time, and it takes political will, the locals' will. It's really, really important that the locals speak up and voice their opinion and let the leaders know what they want so that the nation would not be silent.
You work with displaced persons, with refugees, with survivors. How do you keep human dignity at the center of a humanitarian landscape?
The focus again is on the beneficiaries. It's what they need. So like I said before, when you go into a scenario, a situation, our focus is to figure out the root causes of the problem. How can we deal with the issues the immediate issues at hand? And then once you speak to the locality, you understand what's needed, and that's what should be provided. What you do is you provide your technical knowledge to make things better. It's not like you will bring in these unknown solutions to a locality and try to change the locality. That should never be done. So in scenarios like that, I think the most successful way is for us to be, as we say, locally global.
So your work wide expands from the UN to Rotary and everything in between. How do you balance international diplomacy with the urgency of community voices?
We are all human, so even if I speak to a regional leader or a world leader, they would understand the problem at hand. It's just the fact that you have to be very human, and that's my way. I'm very honest, and then you go and say, look, this is the issue at hand, and these are the solutions we think should be applied. And if you take that time to explain, many humanitarian colleagues of mine, you will understand, they have the same mindset and they know the urgency. So how do you say, minuscule diplomacy doesn't come into it. You do what's required to be done. Of course, there are issues where there's politically tarnished scenarios. Then you need to navigate that in a very sensitive manner. It will take time, but you'll get there.
So you've been trained in peace building, again, in many instances, from Harvard to Chulalongkorn. How do you define peace personally?
I would say it's a process, right? Whatever big words you might use, it's definitely a process. It's not a one-off event. It's something that you should work for. We think of, we say peace of mind, right? What is that? Is it the absence of conflict, or is it the absence of the fear of conflict? For one thing is, in life, you are never going to be rid of conflict. You're going to have it. I think for me, peace is the ability to be able to have a conversation or hold the space for somebody who wants to have the conversation with a different aspect, to say that, I'm safe here, I can speak to you, and I can resolve my conflict.
With all these decades of impactful work behind you, what's the one change you still hope to see in the world within your lifetime?
Societies that have inculcated empathy from their traditional ways, rituals, beliefs or norms, or even the modern sense, has a better way of dealing with conflict. Like I said, conflict is going to be there for the rest of our life. It's about how you deal with it. So I hope all these AI and social media and everything we are coming up with now these days would be geared towards that, would help build cultures and nations with empathetic people.
Did you know Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn? Do join us, follow and like us for more.